everybody. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining Cybersecurity here live, kind of live from Infosecurity Europe in London. We're here on the show floor, just outside of the keynote stage, where we get to chat with all kinds of folks. And we didn't get a chance to talk to Rob Black before the event. We caught him here in person. He's with me now. Rob, thanks for joining.
Oh, delighted to be here. It's a great day and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
All right, it's good energy here.
Definitely is. It's nice to see everyone back and buzzing again, to be honest. It's been too long.
It has been too long. So you, well, before we get into it, I'm intrigued by anybody who's in university and doing research, because you get some good perspectives that aren't always connected to some things that either push you too far or hold you back on something. So tell us a little bit about what you work on, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
I guess I've got several hats on, so I'll share the different hats I wear. So I'm a lecturer of information activities at the Defence Academy in the UK, where I work with military personnel, encouraging them to think about how we integrate cyber operations into military operations, or vice versa. I think at first it started thinking about integrating cyber in, and now it's probably a case of weaving military back into cyber. Okay. And we look at the challenges of how does it fit as a tool of statecraft, does it fit closer to intelligence operations, more like covert action or actual warfare. I used to be involved in the National Cyber Deception Laboratory and former deputy director there, where we looked at researching and exploring the application of deception in proactive cyber defense. So how do we engage our adversaries in our networks? How do we get them to double guess everything? How do we get them to question their steps, question our defenses, and make them actually less successful in their activities, which was great fun. Bringing in that warfighting mindset in the information age, which you don't have the physical dimension. You can't go and punch the attacker on the nose. Right. You've got very limited physical recourse to your attacker, but you can engage their mind, their decision making, and too often we forget that when we think about our threat actors, it's capability and intent. So they're making decisions all the time, but we engage them thinking about their technical capabilities, not realizing that there's a series of decisions they have to make. So that was fascinating research. And then alongside that, I run a university student competition in cyber policy, UK Cyber 912 strategy challenge, which is great fun. Thinking about bringing through the next generation of cybersecurity leaders. We've got a much more holistic approach to strategy and planning. So not just thinking about the technical aspects of the incident, but thinking about the so what's and the implications for the business, the organisation, the government that might be being affected. And it's great to see this pipeline of young talent coming into the industry who are really going to make waves and hopefully lead us to a much more secure future. Yeah. So, and then the last role I have is working with the British Foreign Office, organising policy-based discussions and dialogues on topics of interest in cyber intelligence and warfare as well. So I keep myself busy in that way.
So. And it sounds like the role of a CISO, where they're wearing many hats.
Yeah.
Right? You have the policy, you have the operations, you have the team you're trying to build and keep skilled, and so just a lot of stuff going on.
Absolutely.
I know we can talk about any of those roles if you want, but I know here at the conference you're specifically looking at the legal aspect of cyber, and I think you're on a panel later today, and I think you're bringing an interesting point you mentioned.
I think so. I think we're too. I think we really need to think about what we mean by legality in cyberspace, and not just in terms of which jurisdiction does it fall under and how do we process certain things, but when we think about cyber crimes, are we bringing conventional, traditional perspectives on crimes to the fight? So most people will either look at criminal law or the legalities of cyber crime based on the Computer Misuse Act in the UK, or in data protection, data privacy. And actually, whilst I can see why they're being applied, there's something distinctly missing in our understanding of informational harm and informational damage. So how do we go about categorizing the hurt that has been caused? If I wipe your hard drive, have I physically damaged it? Well, I haven't physically damaged it, it can still be used, so I haven't stolen it either. But that data's gone, it's not been there, and I can't function, I can't perform whatever duties are. So how do we bring in that concept of harm and hurt in this informational virtual age? And I think it really does need us, I guess it really does need us to consider what tools we can bring to this discussion, because it applies everywhere. It applies at the organisation level, but it also applies at the state level. So when you come to the public international law and you look at cyberspace and the applications of laws in cyberspace there, you're going down two distinct paths. You're going down the intelligence gathering path, or you're going down the warfighting path, which is the kinetic equivalent. So did NotPetya amount to an act of war? The discussion about how much damage was done, how many terabytes of information needed to be destroyed before NotPetya became an act of war. The insurance industry are having challenges thinking about exactly that in terms of coverage. But actually it's pulling old, conventional, tired legal regimes into this modern digital age, and I don't think it's fit for purpose.
Right. Can you talk to me a bit about, because as you're describing that to me, you mentioned insurance, and I'm like, oh, that's a completely different part of this equation as well.
Yeah.
Because there's the legal arm. You have the harmed entity or individual. You have perhaps somebody who's suing, or I guess that person suing whomever, right, or looking for justice in that regard. You have the insurance who has to pay out on it. You have the policy folks who presumably kind of set the stage for that in most regards. How do we? Are there any strange things about that connection where I feel like maybe we're fighting or not working toward the same thing?
Well, so I think, interestingly, I was struck a few years ago. I was listening to a presentation by one of the lead individuals at Beazley Insurance, and it struck me that actually the insurance industry have to be ahead of the curve. So they have to be able to work out the premium and the cost involved if we take an insurance policy out. So they have to be anticipating those future threats. They have to be anticipating those costs and livelihoods. So they have to be really at that cutting edge and beyond, and anticipating where the environment's going to move to, where the threat actor is going to move to. But I also think they have a massive contribution in not necessarily the regulatory space, but in shaping how the industry and the organisations that are utilising cybersecurity will act. So, if you think about it in traditional sense, you'll get a reduction in your premium for your car insurance if you have installed extra safety features.
Right.
So if you've installed the latest theft detection kit, then you'll get a reduction. That will come into the due diligence insurance companies will be doing on their potential customers, and I think we're seeing that already, where the insurance companies are expecting you to utilise their forensic investigations teams or their incident response teams, and they're acquiring these capabilities so they can give you the whole package, because they want to have confidence in the product that you're then using, because that then affects the premiums that they'll be charging you. And I think we'll see, particularly with the use of deception technology, I think we'll see a rising tide of insurance companies leading an expectation on individual organisations to put in layers of protection, layers of defence in order to bring that premium down, or they won't insure them. It's sort of, you have to meet this minimum threshold, otherwise we won't insure you. Right. And I think that's going to really shape the market a lot more. And we're beginning to see incidents of that in the US with, I think the US DoD are looking at enhancing some of the NIST regulations, so that if you're going to be a supplier to the DoD, you have to have a certain degree of deception technology layered into your defence networks and other defensive measures in, so that you become a much more harder target that then can work with the DoD with a level of confidence that you're not going to get compromised and have a supply chain attack or whatever it might be. And I think that is going to be the mindset we're moving to. I think really interestingly, if you think about that model, we then have to think about how do we take on a more aggressive defensive posture, and that brings in my argument the role of deception technologies, not just how we currently use them for threat intelligence and threat gathering, but in fighting back and fighting our attackers. And that doesn't mean the kind of the red line of going hack back, but it means how do we make our network much more robust? How do we confuse our attackers? How do we make them doubt the value of the material that they're going to steal? And that, I think, is where there's a real opportunity for some really exciting research, some really exciting capability development, and some really exciting thinking. But if you're in that space, this is where it comes back to the legalities. There is no real legal terrain here, because you've got the Computer Misuse Act in the UK, so you can't do anything to a computer, which is already hampering a lot of vulnerability researchers, because they could be breaking the law just doing the very research to make the system secure. It's age-old legislation, which was never written with the awareness of the internet age as it is today, but it's fighting with our hands behind our back. And then we've got the computer misuse, data protection issues and so on, which are absolutely relevant and pertinent issues, but don't necessarily help us think about how do we protect the data. If you think of the organisations, I won't name any particular organisations that have been compromised recently, but think about it, they're in a situation where I think there's a real fundamental question over what support they should be getting from government. Because if they get hacked, they might lose their data, they might get a tipper or advice from the National Cybersecurity Centre, for example, to say there's something coming, watch out, there's a bad hostile state actor who might be coming after your networks. Or more likely, you'll get compromised you'll have your data stolen, and you'll be asked to share the tippers of that attack with an information sharing community. So all of your collective colleagues or your competitors will be aware of the TTPs of the attackers, so they can protect themselves and don't get compromised. So you're suffering there. Right. And then to make things worse, because of the data protection legislation, which again is written in the right way with the right spirit, but the application of it means that if you are compromised by a hostile state threat actor, you could end up being penalised by a large fine when you're already fighting the fight. It doesn't seem that we've really brought the mindset that we need to in this fight. We're seeing it in a very regulatory, passive mindset of assurance, regulation and building back, rather than the fact that we are going to war every day to protect our networks. Right. And we need to see it like that.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, when I think of legal aspects here, I think of liability. And I know there's a gentleman in the States, Jeremiah Grossman,
sure,
who has been talking for years now about software warranties,
yep,
where almost every other product in the world has a warranty that it will do what it says it's supposed to do,
sure,
and not in cybersecurity.
Oh yeah.
And so the vendors are not liable. Companies are spending millions and millions of dollars trying to raise the security posture, never get to 100%. They're the ones that lose out. They won't. Where it gets interesting in my perspective is if it is an act of war or nation states or something that the insurance companies have drawn a line and says we can't afford to insure these types of activities, therefore your policy won't be paid out.
Yep.
The companies are being left to hold the bag here after spending gazillions of dollars
and assuming that you're being covered as well.
Right.
And I think it gets a little bit more complicated than that. I understand the Lloyd's of London Act of War note that came out a couple of years ago, but I think it creates a worrying situation where you can have exactly the same cyber incident affect you, and in one context it's covered legally and with your insurance, and the other context it isn't covered because it's deemed to be an act of war because there's some other political incident happening at the same time. Let's take NotPetya. If NotPetya had happened this year, it would have been integrated into the military campaign, Russian activities, and it would have been swept under that carpet of an act of war. Happened a few years ago, absolutely the same incident, same disruption to Maersk, but not part of a larger military campaign. Then it comes into a definition at what point does it become a military campaign. If you ask the Ukrainians, the Russians have been interfering in Ukraine for a lot longer than the recent physical intervention back in February 22. So you get this very slippery grey area of where it's defined as an act of war here and therefore we're exempt, and actually it's not an act of war here but it's the same incident and we're covered. That feels a very murky territory to be treading in. If I was a CISO or a board, I would be questioning how fair that is, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't seem fair to me. And what I'm afraid of, and especially, I mean, we talk big international, multinational companies, presumably they make a lot of money and can invest a lot of that money in security solutions. But as you move down the stack to some of the smaller SME type companies, I'm afraid that we're putting too much onus on them to buy all the technologies and have the teams in place to manage them, or perhaps even outsource some of it, but it's an expense. In addition to the checklist policy thing,
and
right?
I think even more, if you go next stage further as well, we're encouraging cybersecurity behaviours in the general population, but I can't tell you how many times my data's been compromised by supply chain attacks over here, over there, with this organisation over here. So why do I bother? And I mean this generally. Here's a cybersecurity professional who has concerns about where my data is. I can't even find out where my data is. I can't even tell you how many times it's been compromised over the last few years. So what difference does it make if I don't protect my data as robustly as possible? Because it's going to get stolen, or it probably already has been stolen, and I think we're going to get to that apathy very quickly, and I think we're going to lose the general population, even if we haven't necessarily got them at the moment. And then you've got organisations who go balancing cybersecurity protections against insurance for this, health and safety measures for this, post-pandemic preparations. At what point do you prioritise
with innovation,
it?
right? and the option to grow?
and I think actually realising at that point that we have to empower and encourage and support. I think it really does come clear at that instance, because it's going to wane away, and the fear of compromise probably isn't enough, because actually you don't know where that compromise is going to come from. You don't know if it's a spear phishing over there, an activity on somewhere else in the network, and you're going to find yourself just chasing your tail and thinking this is too difficult. So I think we really need to change the approach that we're taking to really highlight what we need to prioritize first and ensure that level of security that we need.
So where is the legal space going to go then, you think? Because I mean, we've seen a case where a CISO was tried, right? I don't know if that's the right path forward.
I think it'd be interesting to see if that has an impact on CISO decision making about becoming CISOs, because that liability is a real concern there, as you say. I guess my feeling is that as much as I might talk about we need to think about a new approach to informational harm, informational damage, that is a significant mindset shift from the current status. I could only see something like that happening if at the geopolitical level there was an incident that made us revisit our considerations around kinetic equivalence. So, and that I think would come about with an activity against a NATO nation where the rest of NATO decide that it doesn't amount to Article 5 support, and then we're going to have a real stretching of the alliance. To be honest, that's where I thought Russia was going to push us with Ukraine, and I know Ukraine isn't necessarily part of the NATO and Article 5, but if Russia or with the Baltics or anywhere else was able to create such tension between the coalition partners, it could really bring down the alliance, and that would be a real significant shift. So I think at that level we might see some grand strategic impact and change to how we approach these things, but until then we're going to stick to the kind of tried and tested kinetic equivalence, how much damage, how much harm, and how much data has been lost, and we go down the intelligence route, and so that doesn't fill me with much hope, I guess. Right. And then I think when at that point it then flips into kind of the private security world, privacy security world of making sure we've regulated as much and ensured the protection of us, and falling under GDPR. So I think all of us recognise the progressiveness with which the GDPR was in the EU back when it was introduced, but actually recognising that whilst it was progressive, it also has really shaped the user's experience as well. You look at every time you go on the website now, you get the accept cookies. How many people actually care that and just rapidly click through and push it? So is that the behaviour that we want as a result of this legislation? Yes, help with protecting it and being much more considerate at an organisational level, but are we moving forward the stakes with regards to how do we protect ourselves best? I think that's the questions we've really got to start reflecting on.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point. For me, I'll use the word culture.
Yep.
And I think it's not just a company culture, it's not just one society culture, it's an international culture. And I don't know, I feel that the entities that are responsible are not being held liable. And I think we're kind of just pushing the rocks around, and it's landing on different folks here and there.
And I think that culture thing is absolutely critical, and I think it also spreads across the industry. I think if you look at the issues of burnout in the industry, particularly at the front line, the SOC operation centre, the security operations centres, the SOCs, the threat hunters, the analysts working on their front line, they're burning out because most of the job opportunities are focused on how much I'm going to earn to do the same job I'm doing. And actually, if we instill a warrior mindset in them, train them up as cyber Jedis, cyber warriors, get them excited and passionate about the work they're doing rather than just the handle turning of alert monitoring or whatever it might be they're doing. Get them to get into the fight. I really like the idea of, if you think of computer games, rage quitting is a thing. The game designers will create computer games to make it really hard to get through the levels, so that the players throw their toys out the pram, throw their keyboards out the window, or whatever it might be. What are we doing like that? How can we empower our cyber SOC operators to be the end of level bad guys in our networks? Who is old Wario, if you think of the Mario brothers? Who is old Wario in our networks? Who is going to make our attackers fear and consider how they get past this bad guy? But we don't instill that culture in our teams. We worry about burnout, we absolutely do, but actually we gave them something to be passionate about and driving hard. It would be much more fun, much more exciting. You'd have a much better engagement, and I bet you'd have a much more secure network, and you'd have much more innovative solutions to your network defense problems as well. And I think you'd have a greater retention policy as well, because you wouldn't have the people cycling through 6 months here, 12 months there, get on to the next job. And the key determinant is I'm working from home in the same organisation, whether it's organisation A, B and C. I occasionally pop into work. The only difference is my pay packet actually this organisation wants me to belong, wants me to train up as a Jedi, whatever it might be. You could see how that would make a really compelling employment and retention case.
And I can see where if you're actually gaming the level of your posture, you really know your environment at that point.
Absolutely, yeah. But you need to.
It's not just okay. I have an alert. Let me see what it is, where it's from, where it might be headed. It's a very siloed view, right? Just one thread of the bigger picture. But if you can game the whole posture,
and just imagine how your conversations would change with your tech providers and your vendors at that point, because you're not just looking at an option and abstractly comparing it against the MITRE checklist or the latest 5-star ranking. You're looking at what that tool set can do for you and how you can use it in that fight. And that actually makes it a much better conversation. You'll see product development teams working on designing the latest kit. You'll have teams looking at how you integrate it better. And I think overall it will just really enhance the defensive mindset, the defensive posture, and overall the defensive state of your network. And I think that's really exciting for cybersecurity.
That is cool. That is cool. Well, I'm excited to chat with you, Bob. Robert, I should say, and maybe, I don't know if I could talk to you for hours. I was thinking it'd be great to talk to you after your session as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
But so if we find time more this week, that'd be great, or anytime after. You're very welcome on.
Look forward to it.
I think there's a lot of points in here we can unpack further.
I think we could definitely have a few longer conversations without doubt.
But in the meantime, enjoy your session, looking at the legal thing. Bring your, I'm excited to hear you bring your unique viewpoint to the conversation. I think everybody's going to be on the same page. You're going to mix it up a bit.
I think it's going to be an interesting challenge, I think. So we should have fun, no doubt. We've got a good panel, so it'll be exciting to be on the keynote stage at Infosec and hopefully warm up the audience and get them excited and get them asking questions as well.
Nice one. Well, thanks a million for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.